Today on the Mr. Maple podcast, Matt and Tim count down the top 50 variegated maples. Numbers 50 through 26.
Hey guys, welcome to the Mr. Maple Show. I'm Matt.
Hey guys, I'm Tim. Thanks so much for joining us on one of our podcasts. We're MrMaple.com, a family mail order business, and we ship directly to your door. And we love putting out information on Japanese maples. We have information on Japanese maples coming out daily on our YouTube, but also weekly on our podcast here.
Yeah, guys, we do daily content on the Mr. Maple Show. You can find that under the same name, the Mr. Maple Show, on YouTube or on any of our major podcast platforms. And I think you're going to enjoy that YouTube content. There's something new every single day, 7 days a week there. And we love providing a Japanese maple talk show.
And when we do those live premieres, you can jump in the live chat. We've got a great community of people who love Japanese maples. And if you love Japanese maples, it's a community you won't be a part of.
Yeah, for sure, guys. Now, today we've got an interesting one for you. You guys have really enjoyed our list that Tim and I put together. In fact, the top 25 lace leaf, I think, was one of our most popular podcasts to date.
And today, for the people that love variegated plants, if you love variegated plants as much as I do, we've got a really special one for you. We've got the top 50 variegated maples.
Yeah, this one is a tricky one, guys. We didn't disqualify a lot of things. We actually said maples so that there could be different categories, European maples. There could be maples not from Japan in this list. There could be American natives. A lot of cool things included in this. So it's going to be a battle royale of cool plants, as you can imagine. Inevitably, doing a list of 50, there'll be some things that don't make the list, so you can help debate that with us in the comments section if you're watching on YouTube. And we love your feedback on these. But it's the definitive list. It is right. So as long as your constructive criticism, we're really open to hearing what your favorites are as well.
Yeah, Matt and I sat down. We sort of went through what we thought our top plants were that were variegated, our top maples, and then we sort of ranked them 50 through number 1. Now, I know in Talon Buckholtz's top 50 list, when we cut off at number 25, or we said, and number 25, tune in next week, everyone gasped. So I'm just going to go ahead and let you know, these podcasts go a little long. So we're doing 50 through 26 today, and a really awesome plants.
Man, you guys must have really peer pressured Tim. I can't believe he spilled the beans on that. He really enjoyed that last time. So I'm really shocked y'all got him all that peer pressure. He's only going to do 25 in each podcast and let you know up front. So, guys, I love variegated plants. Like, they're some of the most cool plants we do. We didn't put things on this list that were wildly unstable. So we didn't put things on there, but you won't see Fujinami nishki or Taiman nishki on this list. We tend to just avoid plants that we think are weaker growers or just don't perform very well as well. So there's a few things you won't find on this list. I always think of things after the list that I could have added to it, honestly.
I know, we did the Talon Buckholtz list and forgot Red Dawn, and both of us just wanted to kick ourselves after that.
Only got 5 videos where I talk about how it's one of my favorite trees in the yard, and I skipped it on the list of the. But yeah, there's so many good plants out there, especially when it comes to variegated maples. There's a lot to think about. So we hope this will open your eyes up to some new plants. Now, one other disclaimer. Variegation can mean a lot of different things. So we didn't include things that are just bordered different colors, like a Murasaki Kiyohime. And for some people, they would include things like yellow as variegation. So we didn't.
Man, that would have been my top 25, all yellow.
For you, I did. For y'all, listening pleasure, I didn't allow Tim to just put yellow as a style of variegation. Now, there may be some variegated yellow plants on this list. We'll see. But we stuck to what you consider classically variegated. Having more of a white style variegation, swirling or reticulation or reticulatum. We can get into all the different styles of variegation as we break it down, but we stuck with more of the classic definition of variegation.
So, guys, we're going 50 through number 26. We're going to be, next week we'll be doing 25 through number 1, and number 50, coming in at number 50, Acer palmatum, Cigarnishki.
Yeah, cool plant. Cigarnishki. I like that it's very multi-stemmed, and I like that it has that kind of like checkered look around the leaf. It's a different style of variegation from almost anything else. Like there's not a lot of maples that have this. It's an Acer palmatum Cigarnishki, so it's in that palmatum group. And this one's going to have just an interesting style, yellow on green. So the base color is more of a green with that white to yellow checkered flaking all the way around the leaf. And typically in the early spring, it shows up very, very yellow.
Now, Cigarnishki is a really interesting plant because it doesn't revert, but sometimes it shows its variegation better. Mm-hmm. I think about that one spot that Frank Biles had a Cigarnishki at the Puget Sound Community College in their gardens, and he tucked it away where it got we got morning sun and afternoon shade. And when it did that, it really peaked up it's almost like a sand dusting just on the border, though, of the yellow, which really gives it something really unique and different with that darker green foliage.
Yeah, shout out to Frank Biles. He's one of our biggest mentors in maples. And maybe this fall we'll be speaking in Seattle for the maple side. Maybe we can get by the South Puget Sound Community College and shoot some content for you guys there too. So coming in at number 49. Now this probably could have been higher on the list for Tim. We have Acer palmatum Will's Divine.
Yeah, I love Will's Divine as a reticulated Japanese maple. You really see some interesting veins on it. It can leaf out almost like a brownish color and then go to almost a bluish color. Mm-hmm. I mean, for a Japanese maple that gets the closest to blue.
Did you just Photoshop a tree?
I did not Photoshop a tree. That gets the closest blue-green color to it. Will's Divine can definitely get some crazy colors that seem almost unreal.
It does. I mean, sometimes it's like there's mint with like an aqua over top of it. I know exactly what you're saying. It's so crazy. It's one of those ones you can take a ton of different pictures of. Now, there's a ton of different names for this tree in the trade, too. So if you see elmwood, that's the same plant. Sometimes elmwoody. Now, there's a different elmwood spreader, so not to be confused with that. Sometimes you'll see this one just listed as Will's D. We go with the full name there, Will's Divine. I think that's the most the first and original name for that one being the Will's Divine. So I think it's the best name for it. We always try to go with what's published first and what's most common. And Will's Divine being the key there. Awesome plant, though. I mean, it is a little more, I would say, ruffled of a leaf as well for a reticulated style. So you get a little bit more intricate on the etching around the border of the leaf. And by reticulation, you probably, if you're new to our channel, you might not know this, but most of you listeners are going to know about reticulated Japanese maples. We talk about them all the time. Reticulated Japanese maples have a veining throughout them. So every single part of the leaf looks like you kind of sketch through it. So you can see the bones of the leaf, as my daughter says. It's got this really cool little etching to it. And it just feels like somebody, like an artist, really drew through every element of the leaf. And it gives it this really pronounced variegation. And then what's fun about those are sometimes you get these two-tone kind of blushings through them. And Will's Divine is one of the most prominent of that multicolor effect. You can kind of get a purple, violet eye to it sometimes when it's leafing out.
And the purple violet veining in the leaf as well can be pretty spectacular. Sometimes it can leaf out with a brown reticulated variegation, which is really unusual for a reticulated type. Every time it leafs out, it's so uniquely different and starkly different from many of the other reticulated types. And that's why it made our top 50 list of variegated maples.
All right, so coming in here at number 48.
Guys, we've got Acer palmatum Manasato.
Okay, this is a cool one. Again, there's no bad ones on a list of variegated maples. This one's going to work. So any of the maples, the palmatums we're talking about, are going to work zones 5 through 9. So we'll keep telling you they're just in the section Palmata. This is an Acer palmatum Manasato. This is a fun one. Yanada Tanaka helped popularize this one in Japan in 1993. It was introduced by him. And really cool plant that is a photographer's delight. It's going to have a ton of different changes to it. And it's one of those leaves that looks different every single time you look at it. You can get some really crazy, I mean, I almost think of it as like lightning. You get these like yellow striations through very elongated, shaggy purple leaves. So you get this crazy look. You almost have like a Leonard Lobelum style for how heavy divided it is. But then you get this bright purple with like lime green to yellow outside to it, which can be pretty crazy.
Yeah, and the crazy thing is how dynamically different this plant is from the spring when you have that purple kind of color with that lime green color to the summer color when you've got a green on green variegation. I mean, It is an outstanding variegated Japanese maple that is very unique and stands out from many of the other selections. The name means the wonderful village of nature. And every leaf is, again, a lot of these variegated plants are photographer's delight. So if you're looking for our list of plants you want in your garden and your photographer.
Pretty much the entire list today.
Yeah, it's pretty much the entire list today, because all these plants are going to be so unique and different, and something that gives something that you want to go out there and photograph each and every moment.
All right, guys, coming in at number 47, we've got Mama Fu. Now, this is one of the last introductions by Del Lauk's Nursery. You probably saw our video, if you're a maple geek, on YouTube about Del Lauk's and some of his introductions. And Del's named so many cool plants, from Beni Hoshi to Emerald Lace to Akakawa Hime. And Mama Fu was one of his last ones. So a really cool plant with a distinct bright pink variegation to it.
Yeah, in the springtime, the leaves can leaf out very, 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 very pink with a little bit of green. As the summer progresses, you get more of that green chlorophyll coming into the leaf. It is one of those plants that really stands out from other selections like Beni Shishihenga, because it has more pink to the variegation than Beni Shishihenga. And I love Beni Shishihenga. I mean, it's our logo for MrMaple.com. That's one of my mother's favorite plants. But I think Mama Fu has the edge on it because of it's even more pink than the original Beni Shishihenga that people may be familiar with.
It definitely brings the pink. It is one of those high-intensity, bright pinks. It might be one of the brightest pinks of this style variegation, putting in that butterfly and Beni Shishihenga kind of category. It definitely brings a high-intensity level pink. Dell officially registered this one, I think, in around 2012. We were some of the first people to get this one. I think we actually got this plant from him, I would guess, around 2009, with Del Lauk's and Jonathan Savlich. Introducing a lot of cool plants, and this is one that just caught our eye. Even that it has a similar style leaf and color to Beni Shishihenga, it brought a little bit more pink to the table.
Now, I think Jonathan Savage was his nephew, his grandfather, as he would often call him, was the person that actually came up with the name on this. But Mama in Japanese often refers to the leaves being very different. I mean, there's a cultivar out there called Mama, and it refers to the leaf being very different. And Fu distinctly is a style of variegation, which basically just means variegation in Japan. And so those two things, you've got a different style of variegation.
Yeah, really cool plant. I'm a big fan of it. So that's at number 47, Mama Fu.
Guys, coming in at 46, you're going to really relish this one.
Oh, gosh.
We've got Acer palmatum Relish.
Hold on to your dad jokes. We got a few. Hey, a gentleman just called the office and was on speakerphone, and I won't say his name, but he drops dad jokes from time to time when he calls, and he asked us, how much does it cost for a pirate to get his ears pierced?
A buccaneer.
Jeez, the dad jokes are going today. All right, so next up we have Relish. That's at 46. Relish has a really unique style variegation to it. Now, it's another one that I could throw into that category of having some weird kind of bluish aqua tones to it. Now, again, they're no true blue Japanese maples, so I'm not saying it's one of those Photoshop blue ones, but it has a unique style variegation that really has some very different colors in them. I think Relish is one of the perfect names for it.
And it's one of those plants that people, when they see it leaf out, it doesn't look nearly as variegated. I mean, it's hard to distinguish the variegation. And then as summer approaches, the variegation becomes so prominent on it that you get that blue-green color with almost like a lime-green variegation on the leaf. I mean, to me, it and Asagi Nishki both have that really, and Kokubunji Nishki, that unique style variegation that when they first leaf out, you're like, is that variegated to revert? And then all of a sudden, when summer approaches, you're like, wow, that is amazing. It's so uniquely different than many of your other styles of variegation.
Yeah, it's a light green on dark green, and I mean that dark green can kind of get some blue tones to it. It's a really unique overall plant. If you're following along at home too, and you're listening to this on a podcast platform, everything we're talking about here today, mostly, there will be a few crazy things we'll throw in. We'll try to make sure they're up, are on Mr. Maple, and they're on the MrMaple Files. So if you're wanting to look at photos of these while you're listening to the podcast, it's a great way to do it. But Relish is one that's hard to photograph. It doesn't really It's one that's hard to capture. We'll have to get Brian on it this spring because he's been doing some magic on some of those. But it's one of those that doesn't show up sometimes how crazy it looks in person. And so for that reason, I would say it's one of those plants that when people saw it in person, it really got snatched up here. But I don't think the photos really capture how crazy it can look.
I know that one of our friends, Diana, had introduced this selection, and when we asked her why she named it Relish, and she said, "Oh, but it's because it looks like relish, like you'd put out on your hot dog."
Right.
So I thought that was kind of funny.
All right, guys, coming in here at number 45, we've got Acer campestris Carnival.
Guys, we're talking about a white European field maple. You want to give Carnival some sunlight. I mean, European field maples want sunlight. Now, often people take Carnival because it's so white and throw it in the shade. Well, this isn't a Japanese maple. This is an Acer campestris. And Acer campestris want more sunlight. So make sure you give it some sunlight. If you're in a super hot climate, you may have to give it some protection from the hot afternoon sun, but you're going to need to give it some sunlight so this plant will thrive and do well because this is an Acer campestris, a European field maple.
Now, this also is going to work zones 5 through 9. This one tends to be in more of a small globular shape, so it's a nice sized tree at 10 to 12 foot in 15 years, but think of it more as a rounded canopy to it. And this one really gets some intense shades of white. You can get just some really amazing shades. If you can give it early morning sun, late day shade in most of the south, that's going to pick up that white, give you the best coloration, but then give you a little protection. But it can have some pinks and whites with just the minimal amount of green in the eye of the leaf there. It's one of the trees I would say that has one of the broader white margins to it for sure.
Yeah, I remember going and seeing at Dan Himes. We recently did a podcast with him, going and seeing one of his display gardens, and he had a gorgeous Carnival in his display gardens in Moala, Oregon. And it's just one of those things that is so outstanding as this tree gets established and really develops into a tree. Mm-hmm. I mean, when you see a large Carnival, it's hard to beat the beauty that Carnival has with that much white. I mean, how thick the margins are with how small the leaf is. It's unusual that something that's so variegated could turn into such a beautiful tree.
All right, guys, we're all the way up to number 44.
Coming at number 44, we've got Acer palmatum Higashiyama.
Okay, this would probably be one of the very top ones on Dad's list. Dad was growing this one pretty early on. He was growing this one in the 90s. We've got several of these planted around Hendersonville from the early 90s. And, guys, it's a showstopper. This is one, it doesn't ever revert, so it's very impossible to, like, make Higashiyama completely revert. If you give it a lot of high nitrogen, you can green it up. But then it pops right back out with that crazy reticulated, some people call it the popcorn maple because of how it leaves out when it's first leafing out. They kind of all unfurl at once, and the leaves almost look like little hands coming out. So it looks crazy. Same plant as Higashiyama and Higashiyama. You'll see that out there sometimes in some of the books. Same plant though, and just crazy shades, reticulated, but in a different way than what you're familiar with the Ghost series. It has a distinct etching to it and just a uniqueness that I think makes it underrated. It's an older cultivar. It's been around a while, but it's one everybody should be growing. And it grows pretty quickly for a variegated plant. I mean, it's not uncommon for this one to put on well over 1.5 foot of growth, right at least 1 foot to 1.5 foot of growth a year.
Yeah, it's kind of unusual because this is a reticulated subspecies palmatum, where many of the others are more of that Matsumuri or Aminum style whenever it comes to the reticulated style. Higashiyama is so unusual and so different. And I know what many of y'all are saying. Higashiyama at number 44?
That's crazy.
Guys, you realize we have over 1,000 varieties of Japanese maples here, and we love variegated plants. So it's going to get crazier and crazier. But Higashiyama is also been known under the name Rosio marginatum. I know that for a long time, whenever they came to Europe, it got the name Rosio marginatum on it. Higashiyama is the original name from Japan. And again, some people may say, oh, Higashiyama is different from Higashiyama. Trust me, we've grown them from side by side. It's exact same plant. It's just whenever you go to Japan and you are out there and people are showing you plants and writing down names of plants, they're writing it how they think we will say it.
Right. Romanji basically is the phonic sounding. We always joked we're going to try to sit down with Barry Inger, and it's going to be hard now that he's in Africa, but to get all of the Japanese maples translated into perfect phonic sounding names, which would be interesting to have the truest form of that.
Which is tricky too, because as you go for different parts of Japan, people have different dialects as well. And so how they're actually saying it translated,
there's so many different nuances there.
Will change as well. And that's where Higashiyama versus Higashiyama comes into.
Right. But
the name translates as Umbrella Mountain. And it's probably because of how it unfurls. It looks kind of like an umbrella once it finishes unfurling. I mean, it's sort of got those little points to it like an umbrella does. And then with that reticulate variegation, it's pretty spectacular.
Very cool plant. Older cultivar, highly sought after. It's a fun one to photograph. You'll hear us say that a lot today, but it is so interesting. It's one, I think the specimen in our yard was probably only planted around 2002-ish. Tim and I planted that one. We finally started talking Dad into keeping more of his trees. We took him to some old collections of maples that he had sold in the 90s, and he was like, wow, I should be keeping more. So ours is probably only planted maybe 20 years in the ground now, and it's like, gosh, probably close to 20 feet tall. And it's kind of neat because it shades out some of the undergrowth now, so you get a ton of crazy colors going on it. And just a fun plant to be growing. I mean, Higashiyama, we should be doing more of it, honestly, here in our nursery. I've seen some crazy, wicked bonsais done with Higashiyama. It's a fun one for bonsai if you're looking for an older cultivar. I like it. It tends to grow a little bit more narrow than many, though, but a cool plant.
One of the reasons I like it is it doesn't revert. I mean, Higashiyama doesn't revert at all. Now, if you over-fertilize or let it leaf out too quickly, it may be more green. And I've seen that happen. Summer growth flushes are always green on it. And so you're seeing growth there in the summer that's green. Don't worry, that's going to come back next spring and likely be that pink reticulated variegation that you want. If you've over-fertilized it, don't worry. Just hold off of the fertilizer and then let it come back out the next spring. Again, it resets itself as it leaves out in the early spring. And the best way on many of these types, especially Higashiyama, to get the best variegation on it is to let it leaf out very slowly. And when you do that, you get more and more of that reticulated variation and the reticulated variegation on the leaf.
All right, coming in here at number 43, we've got a lace leaf. We've got Acer palmatum dissectum filigree.
Guys, this is an amazing plant. This is a green reticulated variegation that gets a little white flecking throughout the leaves. It's highly prized by collectors. It's a plant we love to offer here on Mr. Maple, but it does need some protection from the hot afternoon sun.
Yeah, if you're growing this one in a lot of sun, you might be surprised that it is reticulated. So it has that like Ghost series type like etching in the leaf. So a lot of people miss that if they're growing it in a lot of, a very sunny spot. As you get it into a shadier spot, it will get more and more kind of like what you like about Sister Ghost. You get that kind of deep etching and that deep white into the veining, and it just really looks cool. The leaf actually gets a little bit wider in the shade, so you can see that variegation even more prominently. It's a very slow grower. I mean, typically this one's 3, maybe even 4 feet tall, but it can get 5 to 7 feet wide. So spreading out a good bit, it's going to be more of a spreading tree, making more of your classic umbrella style shape, and really cool one though to be growing. If you like variegated plants, it stands out to me as one of my favorite, especially for a green variegated lace leaf. It really, really stands out.
Now, what we've been told is that filigree is the same as suse, which you may see out in the nursery trade, and suse translates as shooting star. So if later on there becomes a
comet,
a variegated lace leaf that looks like filigree with the name of comet or shooting star on it, you know where that came from.
I have seen it sold in the U.S. sometimes as suse, as a different cultivar. Talking to Yanada Tanaka, he was pretty confident those two were the same.
Yeah, and from everything that we've seen, I can't distinguish them. And so when I'm told they're the same, and I can't distinguish them, and it's likely they're the same plant.
All right, so we went from a shooting star to number 42.
Acer palmatum Nebula.
Okay, this one's a cool one, guys. Another of those reticulated, variegated style Japanese maples. Tim and I affectionately call these the new Ghost. They're post-Ghost series. Talon Buckholz quit naming them Ghost, but it has that style to it. If you've watched any of our new Ghost series on YouTube, you know we talk about this one a lot. Nebula is one of our favorites. It's perfectly named. Oftentimes a nebula will have lighter color in the middle and getting darker on the outside of like the actual anomaly. And you'll see this on Nebula. It's a very cool poetic name. Talon Buchholz is an English major, so he comes up with the good stuff.
Guys, I love the green, lime green, bright green, reticulated veining that you get on Nebula. I mean, like right after spring when it's got some pink in there, but with lime green veins and sometimes even a little bit of a lime green edging to the serrated edges. Nebula is just a rock star when it comes to reticulated style variegation.
Yeah, it shows out in the garden. Give this one some early morning sun. Generally the more variegated, the more pink or the more white a Japanese maple is, the more it's going to need late day protection. This one can handle a good bit of sun, but you're going to hold that spring color later into the season. If you can give it some mid to late day shade and early morning sun, you're going to get your best colorations that way. All right, guys, in at number 41, we've got another Talon Buchholz introduction. He's going to make this list a lot. We've got Acer palmatum Illarion. Now, Illarion is one of my favorite Japanese maples for springtime. It is in that Oridano Nishki style variegation, but it's one of the most white versions you can get, especially if you can give this one a good bit of shade. Now, I do recommend this one in a shadier spot. It can be, almost completely white some seasons. I know when I first got this tree, Talon had mailed me one. I was still living there at Mom's, working on the nursery, trying to get things going. I got a package, and Tim and I went running out there, and we had a little box that had been mailed to us, and it had an Illarion there in the box, and we just went nuts for it because the whole thing was white. It just looked amazing, and it's a plant that I'm really proud to grow here. I know the story of Illarion actually comes from one of Talon's favorite workers he'd ever had there at his nursery, and there was a young gentleman named Illarion, and he had kind of charged everybody with going out and finding something cool at the nursery. Now, he has a ton of seedlings and a ton of seedling evaluations that he's always going through. So there's always something cool in that like kind of shooting star series, he calls it, where he has, seedlings around, and not all those are getting selected for being named. So this young gentleman had run across Illarion and brought it back. And, Talon was quite fond of the guy. I think he said he'd moved on to be doing all kinds of great things for the community and people in that area now. But, Illarion coming in here at number 41, and a great variegated plant.
I remembered getting that plant in from Talon, and it was just so white. And it's crazy that something can be so white and, still survive. It was so spectacular. Now, with Illarion, it's one that you want to give some protection from the hot afternoon sun. And, if you get a lot of white on there, don't worry, your plant's going to adapt and start to get some green into it so it can survive. And if you start to get all green, again, it doesn't revert. You can always give that a light pruning. We have a whole video on our YouTube channel on how to prune variegated plants to promote more variegation. And there's certain styles that you can do that with, and Illarion fits in that Oridano Nishki style of variegation that you can do that with.
Yeah, definitely check that. There's a whole video where Tim and I go and trim on a large Oridano to kind of increase the variegation. Really fun way to grow that one. We keep talking about the white. It does have some crazy pink in it as well. You can get some pink swirls in there, so the leaves are almost, cyclical with that like swirling leaf, and just extremely variegated, extremely showy. Acer palmatum Illarion.
All right, guys. So coming in at number 40, we have the Floating Clouds Japanese maple, Acer palmatum Ukigumo. Now, we're not talking about Usigumo. We're talking about Acer palmatum Ukigumo.
Nice try, Tim. It was like our third take where I say Usigumo. I guess I got it on the mind. Ukigumo, we probably made some people mad that one was so low on the list. The Floating Cloud Japanese maple is popular for good reason. Now, I always let people know this one's one of the widest Japanese maples you can grow, but it is inconsistent on having that white sand dust variegation every single season. So don't expect it every single season. Enjoy it when it's there. It is consistently bold orange in the fall, but it is not always consistently white. Now, we have a whole video on how to get the best color on Ukigumo, and what you're going to need is a slow, consistent spring. So you don't want a high heat, fast leafing spring, which is what we have typically here in the South. So we don't get as good a color on Ukigumo here in the South. But man, I've seen it at Bill Shell's garden be completely white in Auburn, Alabama. So it isn't out of the reach. Augustin, who we had on the podcast back I think his episode aired on Christmas, but we actually filmed it back in November. Great friend of mine from France. And Augustin said, well, my Ukigumo is never green. It is always white. Well, I went and visited him in Toulouse, and doggone it, the year I went, it was obviously not all white, because they never are all white. So I give them some heck about that. But it's an awesome plant. It's still one very worth growing, but don't expect it to be completely white every single season. Just appreciate it when it is.
Yeah, I mean, it gives you a great fall color, so it's a beautiful Japanese maple. But when this tree is white, it's hard to beat. I mean, when it is white, it can be electric out there in the garden, and it can be one of the whitest maples in the nursery industry. And, you know, some people will try to say that floating clouds is a different than Ukigumo. No, those are the same plants. So Ukigumo, floating clouds, Japanese maple, awesome plant coming in at number 40.
All right, at number 49, we've got Acer palmatum Mikazuki. Awesome plant. Now, this one, think about purple ghost, but with long, almost more indigo-colored, long lobes. So the lobes are very long on this leaf. It's a unique style leaf. I've had it almost look like, you know, little half moons coming off of it. It's so crazy looking. Mikazuki's way more jagged looking, so it's just got a cool look to it.
It's the first of the new ghosts. This is the first reticulated plant that Talon Buchholz introduced and named, and decided to not put the name ghost on it when it comes to many of the reticulated style Japanese maples. Now, Mikazuki gives that really unique color that Matt was talking about, of this indigo pink purple kind of color, and then in the fall turns to more of a yellow orange and really gives you more like a moon style. And the name Mikazuki translates as crescent moon, and that's where it gets its name, is that fall color with that uniquely shaped leaf to it.
Oh, it's such a cool plant. It's another photographer's dream. It's got so many cool times to it. I've had it in sunlight, just shining. It gets kind of a glossiness to it, and it really catches the eye, especially in that early spring. That's my favorite time for it. You get these weird off purples. It's just a unique purple even unto itself in the Japanese maple world, and that leaf shape really adds something to the garden.
Now, it gives some amazing color in the spring. By late spring, the color does fade on Mikazuki, and it goes to like this unique shade of green with reticulated veining in it as well. And, I mean, it's a plant that just keeps changing throughout the season, and each season is dynamically different from the season it was before. From the spring to the summer, from the summer to the fall, this plant puts on a show, and it's a plant that, I mean, when we were making this list, I was getting Brian to say, hey, what's some of the plants that you really liked growing in Oklahoma? And Mikazuki was on that list because he loved Mikazuki in his garden. It's an excellent tree that many people should be using in their landscape. It's not one that you find as often as something like some of the ghosts today, but it is a pretty awesome plant.
Yeah, we listed it around 10 feet tall in 7 years. I will say it has a really nice upright arching habit. So it kind of has a very, I wouldn't say street tree, but it's more narrow than many of the other upright forms of reticulated Japanese maple.
So guys, coming in at number 38, we've got Acer pseudoplitanus Eskimo Sunset. We often say for this one, the common name is Eskimo Sunset because the correct name is Eskimo Sunset. But so many people have put the incorrect name on it that people often look for it under the name Eskimo Sunset.
Yeah, I'm guessing somebody got that one abbreviated and just ad-libbed a little bit there. They thought they had ESK period, and they said, what starts with Esk? But it's actually from the Esk Valley in New Zealand. There's an Esk nursery down there who's named some cool plants from Esk Sunset to Esk Flamingo. Really cool plants. And, yeah, they prefer for you to call it Esk instead of Eskimo because that's the actual real name. We do put that on the tagline, but not in the cultivar names. I had somebody say, well, then why do you say it that way on your website? And I'm like, we actually don't. We're really clear about it in our description. We're some of the people that love to, try to get the nomenclature right, but we want you to find the right tree. So we do put it down there as the common name so you can see where that's at. It is a crazy style variegation. Now, one thing I always bring up about this tree is I love the underside of the leaf. It's a bright salmon pink to almost like light purple. The top of the leaf, it's a sycamore maple, so you get that kind of larger overall leaf as well, but you get this kind of crazy pattern of greens, pinks, and whites all at the same time on this one, making it very, very unique.
Yeah, the thing I like the most about this plant is its variegation. But what adds to that variegation is the underside of the leaf. That pink purple on the underside, when you're looking up into it, makes it just sort of look like it's on fire. And then you see the added variegation on the top. It just adds so much to Eskimo Sunset. I know when Matt and I were in New Jersey, and we were visiting a customer and friend of ours, and we saw some more mature Eskimo Sunsets. It made me have a whole new appreciation for an Eskimo Sunset when you can actually look up into the leaves and see that underside. I mean, it just added so much extra to the plant because of how awesome that was.
Now, Acer pseudoplitanus is actually banned in New York, so you can't ship it to New York. But if you ever see seeds on an Eskimo Sunset, call me. I've never seen seeds on one. I've seen some very mature ones. I would love to see some seeds on Eskimo Sunset. I've actually never seen it set seed for us here, so I don't think it's too invasive for that. Very cool plant, though. Very unique style variegation, and one you definitely want to add to your landscape. It is one that shows out, though, whether you're standing up under it and admiring the underside of the leaf, or if you're just standing looking down at the thing in awe. It's a plant that it's often people's favorite Japanese maple, or, we throw it in that category of variegated maples. It's not technically a Japanese maple, but we throw it in that category, and it's often people's very favorite tree for that dramatic style variegation that it shows.
So, guys, coming in at 37, and this is a plant I think could have went higher on the list, but this plant is pretty spectacular. Acer palmatum strawberry spring.
Yeah, this is a fun one. You definitely can see the amber ghost influence on this one. It's got some crazy light tones in it. It's almost one of the best versions of a strawberry pink kind of color you can get on a Japanese maple.
I know that when Guy Malot went and visited Talon Buchholz, who introduced this selection, he said this was some of his favorite selections that Talon had made. And they were two of his favorite seedlings out of all the seedlings Talon had around, was the strawberry spring and the celebration. And when Talon sent us a strawberry spring for us to grow and appreciate and produce, it just knocked my socks off. I mean, this is a plant that gives a unique color in the spring that's unreal and is unlike any of the other pinks that you find on many of the Japanese maples. More of that baby pink, that bright pink that is so unusual and so different.
Yeah, it is next level variegated. Again, reticulation refers to that etching throughout each and every leaf on a Japanese maple. And this one it's just a new one that sets the world on fire. It's got everything you want about high peak spring interest, and it brings some just soft shades of pink that really set off by that kind of creamy color it has in the middle. So it's got a lot going on there. I know Grayson Schisler said it's one he could sit there and stare and look at for hours on end, and I understand why. I kind of get lost in the garden with this one a few times myself.
Guys, late summer, this will be a green with green, brighter green reticulated variegation. And sometimes it can be almost a cream color. New growth flushes in the summer go back to being more of that baby pink again. But this is a plant that can give you some red in the fall. And it is so unique with that color in the spring. It had to fit on our top 50 list. I'm really surprised it didn't get in our top 25 because it is such an amazing plant. But again, that just shows you how many amazing plants we have to go in front of us.
All right, coming in at number 36, we've got Acer rubinsons Red Flamingo.
Guys, this is a snake bark maple that is just unreal with crazy pink-red variegation all across the leaves that is just outstanding. I mean, this is a snake bark maple that is just vibrant with a unique style variegation on a snake bark leaf.
Now, originally they had this one as conspicuum. I always joke that the snake barks, they're very promiscuous. I would not be one that could tell you the differences between all the different snake bark species because they're very close and they're very much hybrids. They've crossed with all the other snake barks in the garden, so it's very hard to know what this one originated as. But the general consensus is that it is rubinsons. Really cool plant. This was found as a variegated sport on silver cardinal, and the new growth on red flamingo can be just insanely pink and red on those green leaves. Now, the fall color is actually really exceptional too. You get red bark on this one, so you can get to the stage where you have green and dark red and pink all going on the leaf at the same time. I remember seeing this one in Holland, and it just blew me away. I've always wondered, this one may be the same as S. Flamingo. We originally got it under the name Red Flamingo, but it could be the same plant.
I would assume that it's likely that's the case. But again, I haven't heard from the horse's mouth yet to be 100% sure. But Red Flamingo is outstanding. And it's so variegated. It's one of the most variegated of any of the snake bark selections. The snake barks, I really like them. I mean, you want to give the snake barks good drainage. I mean, you see our native snake bark where we're here in Western North Carolina, we have Acer pennsylvanicum. You find them on the ridges. You find them in high elevations, and you find them where they get very, very good drainage. And the snake barks are no exception. With Red Flamingo, no exception at all whenever it comes to making sure you have good drainage. If you give them good drainage and sometimes something to kind of lean on as they get bigger, you can have a plant that is outstanding out in the landscape.
All right, guys, let's move it right along. Number 35, Kinpai. Now, this is a really cool introduction that probably not a lot of people understand. This is a sport found at Tsukasa Maple on Acer palmatum Osakazuki. So Osakazuki, one of our most popular trees we grow. Everybody loves Osakazuki for that fall color. I actually was in a field with Tim, with Yanada Tanaka, and he took us out there and showed us the original sport in his gardens there of Kinpai.
Now, it's crazy because there are two different styles of language whenever it comes to Japanese, to the actual Japanese. They have two different styles of their writing. And Kinpai is a way of saying variegated from Osakazuki in their lesser known form of writing from Japanese.
Yeah, it's kanji.
Yeah.
And then you have hiragana. And so if you just looked at that in the Romanji, which is the way we get most things, the Kinpai is written out, Kinpai. So for us, it would have been a puzzle you could never solve unless you sat down with a native-speaking Japanese person who also understood the horticultural terms. And so we were so lucky to get to spend that time with Yanada Tanaka and have him explain, this is a variegated Osakazuki. And if you looked at the actual letters in kanji, it made a lot more sense. So Kinpai, super underrated. You get some crazy colors. You still get what you love about Osakazuki in this blazing red fall color. It gets a little bit more elongated of a leaf, so it gets a little bit more Manasato-esque. Still real big fat lobes on it, so they're really a large leaf, but you get kind of an irregular style leaf. Now, when this one first leaves out in the early spring, it's not uncommon for it to have a little bit of a pinkish hue to it, especially in that border. So that variegated part can get a little light pink. That'll actually fade to a little bit more of a cream color on top of the green. So you get a little bit of changes all season, but you still get what you think about with Osakazuki on a variegated plant. So imagine variegated Osakazuki. Kinpai really brings it.
Yeah, the leaf is a little bit different, like Matt talked about, because this is a sport that happened, and that mutated the leaf a little bit. They get a little more elongated lobes, but it's so unique and so different because you get that extra interest with that pink variegation Matt's talking about. But it's still a sport on Osakazuki, so you get amazing fall color on top of that. I mean, so just simply spectacular. Late spring, you may get that pink edging turns a little bit of a creamy color on that green leaf. But it is exceptional being that it's a variegated sport on Osakazuki. I mean, it's hard to beat.
It's a dwarfer form too. Typically they're around 6 foot, even in 10 years. So it's a little slower growing than Osakazuki and many of the others on this list. Tends to be very multi-stemmed, but it really shows out. I think it's a great container plant. It is actually one of the variegated ones on this list that can handle a little bit more sun. So it's a very durable, heat-tolerant one, and it just makes an amazing tree in the landscape.
Guys, we've got a long list of these. We're going top 50 if you're just joining in, the top 50 variegated maples. And we've got over 1,000 varieties of Japanese maples. Over 1,000 varieties of Japanese maples. We're coming in right now with number 34 at Kotobuki.
Kotobuki is just a dope tree. It is so cool. It is one of my favorite versions of the Arita nishki style variegation for all the pink that it brings. It seems like the most intense pink one. I mean, I could have argued cotton candy in this spot too, but it seems to be one of the most pink. And it also has one of the flattest leaves. Like it tends to get real big on the foliage, it seems like. Seems like the foliage is always bigger on this one, and it just really shows out. It's a gorgeous tree, and that pink and white swirling seems to go on for days.
So Kotobuki in Japan was a Japanese drama, and that's what this tree brings in the landscape, a lot of drama. I mean, it is just super, super pink with unique variegation on each and every leaf. And it is one of the most pink forms of any of the Ridano Nishki styles. And I say Ridano Nishki styles because there's Versicolor, Ridano Nishki. There's a lot that have this style of variegation that don't revert. You heard us mention earlier when we were talking about one of our other Illarion and it being a more white selection. And Kotobuki is the more pink Ridano Nishki style. It gives you the most pink of any of those styles. And this plant just keeps putting on pink on the new growth. And again, we did a whole video on how to prune the style of variegation to promote more and more of that pink that you're really looking for.
All right, here at Scottie Pippen, number 33, we got Eye Candy. Now, Eye Candy is an amazing tree. It is fun. It's a goofy tree. You know, if you're looking at it in Romanji, it's Ikandi, but it's not Romanji. It's English. Talon Buchholz named this one. He was kind of joking around like Eye Candy, like, oh, check out that Eye Candy. And it is a fun one. This was actually a seedling from Alpenweiss named by Bob Baltzer. So it's got a lot of what you like about Higashiyama and Alpenweiss. This one tends to have a lot of different colors in it. It's really intense. It's a little more, when you get it out there, a little bit more intense than Alpenweiss, and it has a little bit more pink to it. So it's got like more of a pinkish purple hue that really shows out. This one, much like Ukigumo, you want to leaf it out slowly. It's a better color not in the greenhouse. It's a better color in the ground and garden. And if you can leaf it out slowly, you're going to get more high intensity to it. Now, for that reason, if you can give it some more shade or even early morning sun, late day shade, you can kind of slow down that leaf out process with a little bit less direct light and really get some of the craziest colors on this one. I know the one at Maplewood Gardens this year was putting on a show.
I know we recently shot a cultivar highlight at it, and the pink color on Eye Candy is just exceptional. Another selection by Talon Buchholz, and he's great with the names. I mean, when he picks out the names, he really selects names that really add to the plant. And Eye Candy, perfect name for this plant because it is something that you're going to really enjoy looking at every time you walk by it in the garden. Guys, coming in at number 32, Shaquille O'Neal, since Matt said Scottie Pippen for the last one. Coming in at number 32, we've got Acer palmatum, Noel.
It's the big diesel, Shaq Diesel. All right, Noel is a crazy plant, guys. This is a variegated form of Shin de Sojo. This is a cool one. It was found at O'Brien Nursery by our friend John O'Brien. You know, I talked about this before. I probably talked about it in a 10 at 10, but I can't think of this plant without thinking of the late, great Dennis Dodge. He knew every plant, like everywhere in the world from his basement. He showed me pictures one time that I hadn't shared before of a tree.
That freaked me out. Like literally we
that off?
We took photos of the plant that we had on our records, and then somehow he was showing us photos of the same plant variegated from our photo from our plant and asking us about it.
This is back before the days of texting. This is like 2010. I'm like, how'd you do that? But so he kind of played hot and loose with the idea that Noel was from Japan. I guess he didn't want us to get too far ahead of him on this one. It was actually from right down the road at O'Brien Nursery. And, really fun guy. I'd always go visit Dennis, and I didn't ask for anything, but I left with a box full of goodies, and I brought him some goodies. You didn't really get the exact thing you asked for, but you left with something cool. So as a nurseryman, I'll miss. Really fun guy. And Acer palmatum Noel, it has a swirling style variegation. So think of this one like you combined a Ridano Nishki and Shin de Sojo. So you get two different style plants all into one. You get a pink swirling cyclical splash variegation over top of that Shin de Sojo style Japanese maple color.
Now, there's been a few different selections of variegated forms like Noel. I know there's been Kaleidoscope, there's been de Sojo Nishki, Akagi Nishki, and Noel. And Noel's been the one that we've been in most in production here at Mr. Maple. Mm-hmm. They're very similar whenever it comes to being a red with pink variegation.
I've got all of them here now, and I'm still comparing them, but I can't tell too much of a difference yet between them. They all seems to be a reoccurring sport, to be honest with you. It may be a Shiraz Geisha Gone Wild situation where it's a sport that happens a lot. I know we had one time we were visiting Ed Shin's, and there was a sport on a de Sojo.
I know that there was a variegated sport on de Sojo we had here at the nursery, and I accidentally shipped it out to a customer. So someone out there has a variegated sport that happened on de Sojo that happened here at the nursery as well.
It was just a grafted de Sojo, and we're like, set that one aside, and then we went to find it, and we're like, hey, which house did you pull out of? Oh man. So somebody got it was, it's probably closer to Noel. We don't need another form out there. They're all pretty close. But Noel was the first one to really get into the trade of that pink on Senda Shoujo style variegation. Great plant, very showy. You get some fun, different colorations on it. It gives you some Christmas vibes, but it's actually named for John O'Brien's dog, Noel.
I know. I think that's what most people will be shocked about. It's got such a great Christmas red of pink variegation. You're like, oh man, that really reminds me of Christmas. Such a great name. It's like, well, it was named after his dog.
We've got to get up to John O'Brien's. If you're up in Connecticut, that's a great nursery, O'Brien Nursery, good friend of ours. And I've got to get up there and tour his garden sometime and do a walkthrough at that place. It's one of my favorite, nursery gardens, John O'Brien's.
Amazing conifers, hosta. It's got some really cool, unique plants. I mean,
one of the best hosta collections in the world. I went through there one time when the hostas were at like peak spring, and it was intense. So maybe we can break away and get up there this year. But coming in at number 32, that's Acer palmatum Noel.
Guys, coming in at number 31, one of Brian Rule's favorite Japanese maples, Acer palmatum Higashiyama.
Guys, this one's crazy. Corbin that works here, you see Corbin editing video. He was showing me a picture of his Higashiyama that he planted just recently, and he was saying, like, look how crazy this thing is. Like, he just run up to me excited with the phone, like, this thing's nuts. And I think everybody gets that reaction to it. Like, it is crazy. It looks unreal. It looks like something you edited. It doesn't look like a real plant. It is an intense metallic-y purple. This was a selection of reticulated Japanese maple found in Japan. And one of the things I like about it, too, is it's a little bit dwarfer than many of the others. So it's typically at that 5 to 6 foot height range, even in 10 years, making it a little bit smaller than a lot of the other ghost-style Japanese maples. And it's got a big, long leaf. So the leaf is very much elongated. So it's got that, longer lobes overall, kind of like we were talking about with Will's Divine. It's got that long look to it, but in a dark, almost like indigo-y, purpley fuchsia. Like, it's got so much going on in there. There's so many different colors hitting. I often describe Higashiyama as more violet, but I've seen seasons where it was more purple. So it can change a good bit.
The purple to the lavender to the fuchsia. I mean, the colors can change each and every year with the Higashiyama, but one thing is for sure, that it's going to put on a show. And it puts on a show where you've got the lavender, the purple, the fuchsia is all on the, the main part of the leaf, but those veins are like a deep purple to green.
Yeah.
And it is so outstanding, the contrast between the two, that you just get lost in it. You just want to go out and take more and more photos of it.
Perfect plant for a container. So if you got a smaller area, you want to put something crazy. I know one of Brian's suggestions he makes a lot to people is to put it in heavy shade, and it gets more like white with a little bit of purple in it. So it gets really weird looking.
I mean, it's an amazing plant. It is a great plant for a container, like you mentioned, because it's a smaller reticulated type. It's one of the slowest growing dwarfer selections of those reticulated style variegations. But if you have it in a container, then you can move it around your yard to get different colors each and every year. So awesome plant coming in at number 31, Acer palmatum Higashiyama.
All right, we're doing it at number 30. We've got a pictum on the list. We've got Acer pictum Hoshidori.
If Hoshidori and Acer pictum comes in at 30, what's 1 through 29?
Right.
Hoshidori, selection from Japan, big green leaves, splotched in yellow variegation. This plant is outstanding. It's a plant that I was so excited to actually get in my hands myself. And then I got even more excited to be able to offer this when we started offering these plants on Mr. Maple. Hoshidori, awesome plant. Again, this is a plant that sells out super quick on Mr. Maple. Many of these are. If you're on MrMaple.com and you go check one of these plants to read and learn more about it, and you want to purchase this and we're sold out, you can always go in on MrMaple.com, click notify me, plug in your email address, and we'll email you and notify you when these trees become available again.
One of my favorite things about Hoshidori is you can get some just almost weird on dark green. Like the colors contrast very distinctly. So the kind of the base color is a darker green than most. And so you get this weird two-toneness to it. You start out with almost like pinks and yellows over top of the dark green, and then those colors will fade to a little bit more of like a white cream on green. But early on, it's not uncommon to get some just crazy shades of yellow going on in this. It is one you want to prune out any reversions of, but it's a batwing maple, so you get those large, full leaves. I know I first saw a specimen of this in Belgium. I was at the Maple Society meeting, I think in 2010 or 2011 in Belgium, and I saw one at an arboretum, and my eyes just bugged out of my head. It was actually in fall, and it was still looking so primo. I was like, this is one of my favorite plants. We've got to be growing this. It is a fun plant to be doing. We typically graft these onto truncatum, so very durable there for the rootstock. Now, it's another plant that we do recommend zones 5 through 9. So even though it's a maple, zones 5 through 9 is going to work best for this. And it's a little slower growing than some of the other pictums. Now, pictums do slow down a little bit from the truncatums they're grafted to, but we listed at 8 to 10 foot in about a 15-year period. Now, it does tend to make a nice size canopy to it. So a very mature tree will have about an equal size canopy to it.
Guys, the pictums are some of our favorite plants to offer on Mr. Maple. And it's crazy that, like I mentioned earlier, there's 29 other things in front of this. But you realize we have over 1,000 varieties of Japanese maples on Mr. Maple. And our goal is to make many of these available so that you can enjoy these plants. Whenever it comes to us talking about these top 50 Japanese maples, it's so that you can start figuring out which ones you want to purchase whenever they come available on MrMaple.com. And remember always, I'm throwing this plug in now, always shop on MrMaple.com. We really appreciate it. It just helps support us so we can do more of these videos just like this.
All right, coming in at number 29, we've got Acer palmatum. I don't know if it's dissectum. I think it's dissectum. Acer palmatum dissectum, Sweet Lorraine. Now, this one is a small weeping form. That is a dissectum, but it almost looks more Kiyohimi'd out. Like it almost looks like a small dwarf in its shape. It's super unique. It's another Talon Buchholz introduction that has a reticulated style lace leaf.
And guys, you can get a pink purple in the early spring to a coral pink with reticulated veining that is more green. And so you get a reticulated lace leaf like the filigree that's a classic with that green that we mentioned earlier. But this, you can get a colored pink, either salmon pink or more fuchsia pink purple in the early spring.
It's a great pairing with Acer palmatum filigree. I love this one for its color it brings. I've got mine in a little bit of shade. I might move it out in a little bit more morning sun, but it is so colorful in the ground, and it makes the perfect container plant. So put this one in a big pot and just let it fill out the whole landscape, and it really shows out. It's going to work zones 5 through 9. I typically do protect this one from the extreme suns of the deep south. So if you're in a hotter area, if you're in some of those hotter heat indexes, you want to give this one a little bit more late day shade, but it is a showstopper.
Think about the colors that you like about Ariadne with that reticulated variegation, but on a lace leaf. So really unusual, really different, a newer selection in the nursery trade, but it is a game changer. I mean, it is a reticulated style lace leaf that is very special. And when there's a plant that is so unique like that, it's going to come in high on our list. Guys, coming in at number 28, we have an amazing plant I love, Acer palmatum nishki. It really is unique and different in the fact that when it leaves out in the early spring, you get a almost like purple bordered with a white pink splotching on the interior part of the leaf.
I'm going to go ahead and say we screwed up putting this one down at 28. It probably should have been in my upper listings. I'm kind of shocked it made it down this low. I think we overlooked that one.
This is a plant that is outstanding and so uniquely different. One thing I like about it is its variegation is very consistent on the older growth. Mm-hmm. I mean, it's not just a Arino Nishki style that mainly puts a lot on the new growth. This plant puts it even on a lot of the older growth with that unique style variegation. I remember seeing this on people posting about it in Taiwan and Japan, and I was like, what in the world is that plant? And it's a plant that just drew me in, and I was like, I need to have that plant. It is awesome.
Yeah, it's super colorful. You get some crazy versions of pink and white and green swirling in this. It really just shows out, and it's so different. I mean, it's one of the most intense versions of that Arino Nishki style variegation you can grow. Probably one of the most intricately swirling ones too. So you get a ton of each of those colors. Now, I've had it have a purple border with a pink eye. It really changes so much each season. This one does tend to be very multi-stem. So it does tend to be a plant that's got a lot going on and doesn't really take up a ton of space.
Yeah, and this is a plant, give it some protection from the hot afternoon sun, but this is a plant that is just going to keep putting on lots of really unique colors. especially on each flush of growth, that's going to stand out in the garden. I mean, that splotched variegation with white and pink on it will just draw everybody in to come by and look at this plant.
Yeah, sometimes I like to compare this one almost like to an Ukigumo X Arito Nishki. Like you get some of the things you like about Ukigumo in this one too. Like it's got so intensive variegation, almost looks like it's Ukigumo in a little bit, that splotchy sand dusting almost. And you get that with an Arito Nishki style swirling.
Uzunishki with this style of variegation that it has, it is one of the most outstanding of any of those types. I mean, it stands out from the crowd, especially in that early springtime when this tree first leaves out.
All right, guys, coming in at number 27, we've got Acer palmatum Catalina Yetsubusa. This one is a very unique one. It's a very fun one. It's one of our first ones on this list today that is a variegated style of Makawa Yetsubusa.
Variegated Makawa Yetsubusa, that means this plant is going to be pretty awesome in your garden. Catalina Yetsubusa, it has a unique style of variegation. When it first leaves out, you don't notice the variegation as much, but the leaves are more elongated than a typical Makawa Yetsubusa style. And then as the late spring progresses, the variegation comes into the leaf, and you start to notice that it has lots of margins on some sides of the foliage and streaks on the sides that is more of a lime green. And it makes this tree really unusual and really special.
I would say one of the things that sets this one apart from some of the other variegated Makawas are almost how like antenna-like some of the new growth look. It almost has these little antenna-like prawns that come out on top of it. It definitely has a more elongated leaf. I mean, it's like a chicken foot. That's what sticks up on top of it. You know, there's already a chicken foot with Zhizhao, but it gets these little funky growths over top of it that just look like insect antennas or something. It's super interesting. It is a dwarf dense habit. So you're going to get everything you love about that Makawa Yetsubusa style shape, but in a variegated format. It could easily be higher on our list. We could have probably went too many Makawas right at the top. We did spread them out a little bit for you. Catalina Yetsubusa is super nice. It's a great container plant or in the ground. So far for me, it's done exceptional here in full sun in zone 6B. So it is one that's pretty durable as a variegated form. Given it some late day shade, you may get a little bit more white into it, more from the yellow to a little bit more creamy coloration. Really fun one though. Fun one to put in a container and play around with where you're going to put it. And it would make a very funky bonsai.
That it would. Coming in at number 26, Acer palmatum Benny Sheehan. This is the purple smoke Japanese maple selected by Harold Johnston of Alabama. It's extremely heat tolerant. We mentioned Manasato towards the beginning, and that's the closest thing to this selection. But Benny Sheehan holds its purple a little longer throughout the season, is a little more heat tolerant. And this is a plant that really has that cyclical style foliage that is really unusual and stands out.
Now, Benny Sheehan is one that's proven itself through the test of time. Being introduced down in Alabama, this is one that's exceptionally heat tolerant. It's grown in a lot of sun down in Alabama. It was actually one Harold found at a garden center, and he saw this sport going on a blood goods seedling. And the original tree had a dark, dark purple to it, and this sport going off the side, he knew it was going to be something special. And so by grafting that, it turned into Benny Sheehan. Now, the reversion of it is actually really nice purple as well. We probably should start grafting the reversion of this again because the reversion of it is a really nice purple, even in that. It doesn't revert a lot. It's a very stable plant, but if you do get the reversion of it, it's actually very desirable, and it's one called Purple Mask.
Yeah, and the unique thing about that selection is it has more of that yellow-orange fall color, and that's what you get out of Benny Sheehan as well. I mean, Benny Sheehan is everything that people like about Purple Mask, but variegated as well. And it's super heat tolerant. It really is one of the most heat tolerant Japanese maples that we do. Born in the deep, deep south in Tallahassee, Alabama, Benny Sheehan is our last one coming in at number 26 today. And you got to think if Benny Sheehan's our 26th, 1 through 25 is going to be pretty good next week.
All right, guys, I hope you've enjoyed this listing of variegated Japanese maples. You can always check out these videos when they air at 8 p.m. on Sundays if you want to watch the video formats. And we really appreciate you tuning into our podcast. We love doing a weekly show about Japanese maples, and it's kind of our little talk show just to talk about whatever we want to or with some interesting friends. We've got some great interviews lined up. There's some big ones happening. and I hope you'll check those out. And if you haven't checked out our back catalog here, we're up to we're over 30 now. I don't know exactly what we're at, but we're over 30 episodes in on the Mr. Maple Show podcast. There's some absolute gems, guys. We've interviewed Talon Buckholtz. We've interviewed Jim Putnam, Billy Schwartz. He had a wild one. I can't believe that one hadn't went viral yet. That was one of the craziest interviews. There's so many good interviews, with Sue Egriff and Dan Himes and so many fun plant people. Definitely take a second, check those out. There's also some great how-tos where we talk about, how to grow Japanese maples, how to water, and things like that. So be checking out our channel. Go back and check out some of our older catalog. But the best is yet to come. We've got some great stuff lined up for you.
Guys, thanks so much for listening. Make sure you go find us on your favorite podcast platform where you may be listening today and give us a 5-star review. We'd really appreciate it. It helps more people find us and learn about this amazing Japanese maple focused gardening podcast that we do here on the Mr. Maple Show podcast.
Take care.
God bless.
And have a great day.